part of several organizations and several movements in my city, one of which is the Southside Growers Academy, where we do boot camps, teaching community how to grow their own food. We do 4-week sessions. And this particular talk on seed saving is one of those weeks of, this is actually week 2 of the class. All right, let's see. All right. Today we're going to talk about what is a seed. We're going to talk about the different types of seeds. We're going to learn the process of starting seeds indoors. And obviously we're not going to practice sowing a tray of seeds, but I'm going to talk about what you would do in order to sow a tray of seeds. And then we're going to talk about some of the global issues that surround seeds that we all need to be aware of as we maneuver through this most interesting time. First, we're going to go through a little bit of vocabulary. What is a seed? We're going to talk about propagation and germination, because I'm not going to presume that anybody knows the definitions of these things, right? It would be kind of lofty on my end if I did that. So let me see. Let me make sure I got my stuff together. Yeah, I see my screen still. Is it still showing?
Yes.
Yeah, see okay. Vocabulary, yep.
Okay, cool. All right. So, let's see. All right, so the first thing that you need to know is, okay, what is a seed? The seed basically is the method in which, the plant repopulates itself or reproduces itself. You can talk about the birds and the bees and how the birds and the bees, they go and they, pick up pollen from one plant and then they transport it to the stigma of another plant. And then as a result of the fertilization or pollination of these plants, then it generates, the seeds, and then the seeds get cast by either animals eating them or human beings taking the fruits or whatever, or the wind blowing them, or they just drop on the ground. But the base that you need to know is that all of the genetic information for every plant is located within the seed. In this graph, I'm showing the process for a seed's development. When you plant your seed, what is happening once the water hits it? I'm getting ahead of myself. But if you look at the graph, basically, once that seed hits water and the right temperature and the right conditions are met, the seed will begin to sprout, sending a taproot down and what is called the cotyledons up. When we talk about the seed having all of its genetic potential already inside of it, the seed has instructions. It has a list of things it's supposed to do already embedded inside of it. We don't really grow plants. Plants grow themselves, right? Our role is to provide the proper conditions for those plants to maximize their potential, right? To live out their genetic destiny, right? So, a lot of us talk about having a black thumb or whatever. I think that's a part of our internalized racism. Not all of us can grow plants. It's just sometimes we do too much or we do too little to support the plants in their development, right? So it's not about, anybody having some cursed appendage that won't allow them to produce a plant. Let me check my notes. I want to make sure I cover all of the things. All right. Yeah. Okay. So, a lot of this also is important when we talk about biomimicry. So, I do a lot of work in community. So I try to correlate, the phenomenon that we see in nature to the phenomenon that we experience as human beings. So, the seed, in most instances, for all of us that reproduce or have children, the seed is basically can be exemplified through the pregnancy process, right? Inside of the seed pack, similar to a woman's placenta, the seed pack has all of the nutrients and food for the seed's development, right? So once you plant that seed and it's activated, it will develop on its own in its first formative couple of days without need of any significant, it doesn't need photosynthesis in order to germinate. But once it gets out of its seed pack and it has developed past its cotyledon stage, and if you can see my mouse, once it starts to develop its leaves, that's when photosynthesis has to start activating and taking place. Propagation. What is propagation? Propagation is the process of breeding or growing plants from cuttings or from seeds or flowers. There are two different types of propagation. There's asexual propagation and there's sexual propagation. So in asexual propagation, you don't need a seed to breed the plant or to grow the plant, right? To start a new plant off. For example, many of us probably seen our potatoes start to grow sprouts and roots if you leave them on your counter and they get close to some moisture, right? That's a form of asexual propagation. Also, I see a lot of this on the internet. People want to regrow their lettuce, you know what I mean, or regrow the carrots, or so they'll take the bottom cutting of the lettuce or the carrot or the onion, and they put it in some water, and then it starts to regrow itself. That's asexual propagation. Another form of asexual propagation is what you see the picture of the ginger. The ginger has all these rhizomes on it, and once it gets touched by water or moisture, it will begin to develop roots, and then you can break off a piece and plant that in your garden. Another form of asexual propagation is through rootings and cuttings. So you can take a cutting of some lavender, or cutting of some rosemary, or cutting of some elderberry, or a cutting from a tomato plant, and then if you have it, you could dip it in some rooting hormone. That'll probably make it more successful. But if you don't have rooting hormone, you can just kind of keep it damp, and it will start to develop some roots, right, which you can then plant inside of your garden. So the sexual reproduction is the birds and the bees, the flowers and the trees, and the pollen touching the stigma, and going down and creating the fertilization of the plant. And that's the one that we most are familiar with when we talk about seed starting. But also remember that you can reproduce plants through cuttings, through rooting, and through grafting. It's a whole nother conversation that we probably don't have time to go through today. But I just want to make sure that that you don't always have to start stuff from seed, right? Some hacks that you can employ in order to reproduce your plants. A lot of folks that do hydroponic growing, they use asexual propagation. So they'll have a tomato plant or a marijuana plant, and it'll be what they call the mother plant, right? And they'll have this plant really taken care of well. And what they do, instead of starting each individual plant off from seeds, they'll just take cuttings from that one plant and then get it rooted, like I said, rooting hormone, what I mean? Keep it damp or what have you, put it inside of your seed mix, and then, stick it out into to wherever they're gonna live. Okay, look, so I'm sorry, because I got my screen shared, I can't see the questions. So if anybody has questions, I guess I'll figure out how we can, cover that when we get to the end. Or Siobhan, feel free to interrupt.
I can do that.
Yeah. So anybody has any questions, just go ahead and stop me as I go along.
The first question is, you said you can dip the plants in what again?
Oh, it's this stuff called rooting hormone. All right. I don't have an image of it, but you can Google rooting hormone. It's a little white powder. It's basically a plant hormone. It helps the plant. It stimulates the plant's root production, right? So on the edges of the plant, if you cut it right, when you're doing cuttings, you should always cut at the it's like right where the plant splits. It has these little nodes. Damn, I wish I had a picture. But basically, if you got the main stem and you got a branch, if you cut at the if this is the main stem and this is the branch, if you cut where the branch and the stem meet, that's a node, right? Cut there, and then you could dip that part into the rooting hormone, right? And still put it inside of some seed mix or some soil, what have you, and keep it moist. But as it sits inside of that space, the rooting hormone will stimulate root growth off of the cutting. And there's certain plants that this works better with than others, right? For example, peppers, tomatoes, hemp, the ganja. I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to offend anybody, but it works. Woody plants like lavender, blueberries. And I'm saying, yeah, it's sage. You could do it with a lot of plants, but I mean, I wouldn't try to be rooting kale or like collard greens. I mean, for what? Because they grow pretty fast anyway. So yeah, that's just my opinion. Any other questions, Siobhan? Just help me out with that, please. Thank you.
Will do.
So yeah, asexual propagation and sexual propagation is two different types of propagation. Germination is the process of the sprouting and development of the seed when it comes in contact with water and soil. And I must add also temperature, right? So seeds are there's a lot of different types of seeds out here. There's billions of different types of plants. The plant kingdom is wide and diverse. But the thing is that every seed has a different set of conditions that it needs in order to germinate, right? So different temperatures, different amounts of water. Some of the seeds got to go through a little something before they can begin to sprout. So in this process, this graph here, this image is just basically a field pea being going from seed into transplantable seedling, right? And like I said in the other image, as you can see here, I'm over here pointing out. Look, I'm over here pointing at my screen with my finger, like y'all can see. I'm sorry, I'm all zoomed out. So look, so here you see the original seed, and then it's got a little dampness and wetness. It's been staying wet. This is the tap root that's beginning to come out of the seed. It's continuing, so it's splitting in half. The seed splits in half, right? And so on one side of the seedling, you got the cotyledon. This is the cotyledon on the side here, and then this is the what we say probably would be the baby leaves. It's going to take a couple more weeks for this one to get planted. But as you can tell, there's as much as it's going up into breaking through the soil, is going down, right? Depending on what you planting, some seeds might need to be scarred, right, before they can sprout, right? So seeds like, or they might need to be soaked, right? Josie talked about this a few seconds ago. I never soak my seeds. I probably never scar them either. But me and my homie, when we do our seed starting for like peppers and tomatoes, soaking them overnight breaks down the seed shell. I mean the outer coating of the seed. Don't do it longer than 24 hours. But it once you propagate those seeds after they've been soaked, it'll increase their germination rate, right? Just kind of like you letting it break down a little bit before you plant it inside of the soil.
So there's a question.
Sure.
The question is, can genetically modified fruits, vegetables, or seeds be replanted to produce a harvest?
Yeah. You guys must be checking out my slides ahead of time. Then I'm going to talk about that.
Let's wait on that.
Yeah, look at you. Y'all are sharp. I love it. All right. Okay, look, check it out. Okay. So there's different types of seeds. Okay. I'll go ahead and get into the question just real quick. Just, there's so many woke people. We're all woke, right? We're awake. You know what I'm saying? We're all conscious of something, right? In the last couple of years, there was a lot of us were confusing hybrid crops with GMO crops, okay? And there's a difference. It's a world of difference. And I just want to make sure that you all understand that just because a crop that you ate doesn't have seeds that you can see, that does not mean it's a genetically modified crop, okay? So the reason why I say that is human beings, well, yeah, people have been hybridizing crops forever, right? So what they call the original crops that human beings ate were foraged for, right? Our scientists call them wild crop relatives, right? So a wild crop relative is basically like the original corn or the original kale plant or the original carrot, right? It's been so long ago that those crops existed that you probably won't find them. I mean, unless you go into very rural places on the planet, like or very untouched human touched spaces, right? Or places like the continent, like Africa, maybe Asia, but definitely not in the United States. So anyway, when two plants of the same species, right, are in close proximity to each other, if one of those plants' pollen gets into the other plant, right, and they're of the same species, but they might be different variety, right? Once they touch each other, they can create a third variety, right? That's the process. That happens in nature. Like you might have seen it if you plant two types of squash in your garden, right? Say you plant butternut squash and you plant acorn squash in your garden, right? And you make them close together. The butternut squash and the acorn squash cross-pollinate, and then all of a sudden, when the squash starts to grow, it looks like a mutation. It's like, what is going on? This is a whole nother type of squash. This don't look like the seed pack that I bought. Okay, what's going on? The plant hybridized. Okay. Now, human beings or biologists or botanists have been using this process of hybridization for generations, for years, right? So they've taken different varieties of plants of the same species, and I'm probably doing that wrong, genus. Yeah, that's right. Look at Mike. The same genus, right? And then they bred them not like in a laboratory with like microscopes and genetic genome sequencers, but like I took the pollen from this plant and I put it to this plant, and I subsequently, for 6 generations of this plant, like I did it once, and then I did it again, and then I did it again, and then I did it again, and then I did it again. After you've done it 6 times, you lock, the genetics of that seed in place. So then, you could take those seeds and, it'll probably reproduce the variety that you hybridize. So, an example of this is orange carrots, right? The original carrot doesn't even look like the orange carrot. It probably was a little stumpy, and then, I've seen a lot of white ones, right? And then I saw some very dark purple ones, right? But the orange carrot was bred for its beta carotene content, right, and its size. So when we eat orange carrots, this is a result of someone years ago, hundreds of years ago, deciding that they wanted to breed the carrot for its beta carotene content. So it's orange. GMO is a whole nother situation, right? So people have hybridized plants not only for taste, nutrient quality, but also for disease resistance, drought tolerance. You know what I mean? So they figured out that there's qualities in the different plants that they might want to try to enhance, right? So they breed just like people do horses, right, or cattle. You know what I mean? Or dogs, you know what I'm saying? The people breed these animals to try to enhance the different qualities of them. And and botanists have done the same thing with plants, okay? This is not an unnatural thing. This is what nature allows, you know what I mean? Or nature would do on accident if it just was in the wild. But the genetic modified conversation is a whole nother scenario where scientists are in a laboratory, not cross-pollinating plants. They're cross-pollinating different forms of bacteria, various forms of animal DNA, you know what I mean? And then they like injecting that into the genetic sequence of the plant or of the seed, and as a result, coming up with something that's not solely plant. You know what I mean? It's like it's a whole nother scenario, right? It's a fusion of the plant species and something else from outside of the plant species to try to, increase its shelf life, or, you know what I mean, make it pest resistant or fungal resistant or what have you. And the challenge of this, or at least, the problems that I have concerns about, is that, what happens when you introduce a plant that has been fused with other genetic DNA from other life forms into the ecosystem, right? What does it do to the ecosystem? What does it do to other plants? What does it do to insect life? What does it do to animal life? What does it do to us as human beings? So we haven't been genetically modifying plants long enough, in my opinion, right? Or at least from my perspective, to even know what kind of consequences this has for subsequent generations, or how the alteration of the DNA of a plant from multiple sources, like I'm putting salmon DNA in the tomato DNA, how will that impact the human DNA, right? Because you are what you eat, right? It'll tell you a story about, nutrients in the body and how your human DNA is affected. You have a genetic potential that is activated by virtue of you having all of the nutrients that your body needs, right? And access to sunlight. So if someone introduces a new type of DNA into your diet, how will that transform your DNA? Right? This is a question. I don't know the answer. But I think all of us probably got a little mutation in us now because there's so much GMO stuff that you wouldn't even believe. All just majority corn, soybean, all that stuff so you're eating anything with corn or soybeans in it, you're probably getting a little bit of altered DNA stuff in you. Anyway, sorry. I hate to burst your bubble. Yeah, so anyway, so the different types of seed, we talked about genetically modified, we talked about hybrid. Conventional seed is seed that has been like pelletized or grown for commercial use. It could be a hybrid, but it could also be it could be a hybrid crop if you get conventional seed. You're probably going to get some hybrids. I mean, chances are 9 times out of 10 you're going to get hybrid conventional seeds. But these are seeds that may be pelletized, seeds that have been raised to be drought tolerant, seeds that have different qualities to them for whatever it is you want to grow. Certified organic seeds are seeds that have been grown in a process denoted by the USDA as organic or certified by the USDA as organic. I'll look. How much time we got? Because we could talk about a lot of stuff about organic, but I don't think we want to really. All right, yeah, we came to talk about seeds, so I'll just keep it short. That just because the USDA says it's organic doesn't mean it's organic by what you think is organic. Okay, so anyway, let's just leave it there. They got a rating system of organic. It might be 75% organic, and it still gets the label. So what's the other 25%? I don't know. I mean, is that organic? I don't know. The questions, conundrums, and moral issues. Anyway, ethics. Open pollinated seeds are seeds that have been open pollinated in open spaces. So these are just the basic 4. When I grow seeds, when I buy seeds, I think what probably would be best to talk about is also heirloom seeds. Heirloom seeds are seeds that have been since like at least 1950. They said that a lot of people use this date as the date. If the seed has been around since the 1950s, then it's probably it's what they call an heirloom variety. Heirloom varieties are wide and diverse. There's people that have developed these varieties. They have narratives. They have stories. There's when we go to the store, we're probably not seeing heirloom varieties. When you go to the grocery store today, you're seeing probably a lot of conventional crops, but there are millions, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of different types of varieties of crops. And so the heirloom varieties will help you explore the wide biodiversity of the different types of crops that exist. And it's important to grow them so that we can keep that genetic legacy alive and keep those stories alive, as well as the taste palettes wide and diverse, the nutrient availability wide and diverse. And then it's just fun. For me, I personally just love being able to try out new different types of peppers and tomatoes and the different varieties of squash and corn. It's like so many different, the rainbow of type of plants that are available once you start doing research around heirlooms is amazing. You know what I mean? So I encourage you to get into those. I got ahead of myself. Why grow heirlooms? Loss of crop diversity. When you, like I said, when you go to the grocery store, it's probably like less than 16 different types of crops that you can get from most of your grocery stores. And so that the result of that is like people are just growing the same things over and over again. So we try to make sure that we increase crop diversity instead of limit crop diversity. And then the other piece is that when we talk about seeds, we got to talk about corporate control of seed production. What we see is that there's a there's big name companies, Bayer, Monsanto, or what was Monsanto. I think they changed their name, right? Didn't they do a rebrand because they got so much. Yeah, so it's crazy. But these large seed companies taking control of the seeds. One thing I didn't note is when we talk about the GMO is like once people created. Well, they did it too with the hybrids. Like a lot of times people will hybridize a crop and then they will patent it and say like, okay, this is mine. You know, you can't grow it unless you get my permission, which is crazy. But I mean, people do it all the time. Like there's a hybrid of plums and apricots called pluots, right? And so there's a guy who was like, yo, I got the patent on pluots. This is a tree, right? So it's a hybrid. It's a hybrid of an apricot and a plum. Apricots and plums live in the same family, so you can crossbreed. You can hybridize them. So he's made these pluots, and if you want to get pluots, you got to go through him. And I mean, I'm not hating on his hustle. You know what I'm saying? I guess that everybody got to get it the way they want to get it. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, you know, I you ain't gonna stop me from growing what I want to grow. You know what I mean? But on a corporate level, when we start farming on a large scale, you know, these companies be like, yo, you know, do you have a license to grow these seeds? And then with the GMO crops, that it becomes even more dicey because then they're like, okay, well, we're gonna sell you these seeds, but they're terminator seeds. They only grow once. And then you got to buy more seeds from us, right? After one crop. And, you know, you could talk about the Roundup resistant varieties and how, you know, a farmer that was living next door to somebody that was growing Roundup resistant wheat or what have you got caught up in a legal jam because the pollen from the farmer who was growing Roundup ready stuff blew onto his situation. And then Monsanto was like, yo, you're not allowed to grow, you know, the wheat that's Roundup resistant, even though you didn't plant it, you got it was pollinated by our crop. So it's weird and very horrible. And then also, you know, the consolidation of these seed companies, like these companies are being bought up by different companies. So it's only going to be certain places that you can, if it continues to consolidate, there'll only be certain few spaces that you can get seeds from. So with that being said, I got to plug Mama Ira Wallace at Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. She's a Black seed keeper. Southern Exposure is probably one of the best places or well-trusted places from my vantage point to know, you know, that these are seeds that are being grown safely, and you know, the varieties of heirlooms that they have in their forte is phenomenal, right? Every year I buy my seeds from Southern Exposure, but there are probably other companies, you know, folks buy their stuff from Johnny Seeds. Some people buy their stuff from Baker Creek, but I heard Baker Creek was very, how do you say? They had some inclusivity issues. But my personal experience with them is just that they have a wide selection. But you know, I like to spend my money with people that share my values. So Southern Exposure is the place to go. I will talk a little bit about Vandana Shiva, who is an activist, Earth Mother. She has been warring with these companies around genetic modified seeds for a very long time. I got a video I will show real quick, and then I'm going to take this home with some tips on how to start your seeds. I mean, I think Josie did an excellent job with that, but I'm just going to drop my little 2 cents in that pot, if y'all don't mind. Let me see what I got. New share. Where's my? Okay. Give me a second, y'all. I thought I got it up. Oh no, here it is. Okay. All right. I'm gonna let you hear from her yourself. I hope this works.
We can't hear any sound.
You can't hear the sound?
No.
Oh shit. Okay, well, you know what? Never mind. Sorry. Oh, I apologize. Excuse my language.
Is the volume? No, the letters in the Bible somewhere. I'll put them together. Is the volume? Try the volume on the YouTube video. Is that it?
It's all the way up, but
It's
I don't know. This is my first time trying to share a video from my YouTube onto the group chat. But well, how about this?
The title is there.
It's called Vandana Shiva Explains Clear. I'm gonna put it in the chat.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect.
I'll put it in the chat so that way y'all can see that. If I can pull the chat up. Okay, this is going crazy. All right. Y'all bear with me, all right? Get back to my PowerPoint. All right, boom. And I don't know how to get this shit in the chat. Let me see. I'm gonna send this. Oh, there we go. There is the chat. Wow, look at that. There we go. To everybody. I'm sorry, man. This is so fun. I'm trying to figure out how to use these technologies, man. So anyway, Vandana Shiva is an activist who has been working to try to make sure that farmers in India aren't oppressed by these seed companies, right? So she's a seed saver. On top of, she's been advocating against the GMO takeover of her community in terms of seed sales. I mean, what she saw with the production of cotton is that they were selling the farmers in India what is supposed to have been a pest-resistant version of cotton, but it was the seeds were terminator seeds. So the farmers were having to buy, seed every season, right? And they were going in debt, and people were like so hurt by this. They were like, farmers were like killing themselves. You know what I'm saying? Like they were like committing suicide because they could not figure out how to feed their families with the way that this situation was going. So Vandana Shiva is somebody you should look up. She's on the forefront of the crop diversity conversation. She's on the forefront of battling against these corporate entities that are trying to genetically modify our food and all those types of things. So, all right, so just going to get into it and kind of bring it on home with you guys. When we do our seed starting, it's only like 6 things that you really need in order to get it popping. Of course, you need seeds. You need some sort of germination mix. You need light. You need some containers or trays. You need some tags, some labels, something to identify what you're growing. And then you're gonna need, some sort of a watering can or a spray bottle or some sort of a hose that has a sprinkler setting on it. So I'll try to make sure that I have some sort of attachment on my hose that will mimic rain on my trays. But that's just me. You could do it however you want to do it. And so I will indicate here. Oh, okay. She said I got 5 minutes. Holy shit. Okay, sorry. I'm gonna try to get through this as quick as possible. Sorry. We gotta talk about GMOs, man. I'm sorry. I get excited. So anyway, use warm water when you're doing your seedlings. Keep the soil moist to the touch, but you don't have to be soaking wet. Everybody does this differently. I mean, there's no like, this is the way. And it's in gardening, you'll learn that anybody that tries to tell you like, this is the way, they're probably like tyrannical. and you're gonna have to figure out what works for you. So in this situation, when I plant my seeds, I use seedling trays, which give me like an exact count, like 72 count, 200 count, 128 count, and then I plug my seeds in appropriately. You can buy equipment like a drop seeder that can like do that for you, but I mean it's a form of mindfulness for me to like spend time to like drop my seeds into these seed trays. And then after I drop, I don't pre-soak my trays. I put my seed mix inside of the tray, and then I plant my seeds, and then I water them in. But I don't water them with like a huge, like I use a sprinkler setting on my hose. Yeah, so that's me. And my boy John just came through and just gave me a thumbs up. We also use this. There is seed starting mix that you can get. You could start your seeds in soil. That's fine. I mean, that's perfectly cool. But there is soil mix. There is a seed starting mix that has vermiculite, perlite, which are two elements that help absorb water. It has coconut coir, peat moss. These are also elements that help absorb water. And then it's also inert. It doesn't have any bacteria in it, but the good thing about that is that it also doesn't have any diseases and potentially, that could affect your seeds. So I use seed starting mix. It's a soil media. It's not soil. It's a seed starting mix. I might add some compost into it just to be, fancy, but I usually throw a little kelp meal or alfalfa meal into the mix, so that when the seeds grow and break through that initial cotyledon stage and they start to photosynthesize, they do have some nutrients inside of the seed tray that will allow them to absorb before we put them in the ground. Yes, hardening off is the thing. Taking plants outside for a little while before they get planted once a day to get them used to the outdoors. It's like you incrementally increase the amount of time, that they're outside. So it's like one day you might put them out for an hour, next 3 hours, next 6, and then like at a point, they will be perfectly fine. But if you just take them straight from out of your greenhouse or indoors outside, it causes transplant shock because the plants have been babied in the indoors and they've been chilling in your house with, your 65 degrees or 70 degrees. I don't know, depending on what kind of black folks we're talking about. You might have different degrees that you keep your AC or your HVAC on. I don't know. I do 65 because I have oil heat. So, anyway, your seeds need to be hardened off, because if they've been pampered indoors, you take them outside from being indoors and being raised indoors, it can cause them stress and it can actually kill them off. Common issues people experience: pale green leaves on your seedlings indicate a lack of nitrogen. If your stems are very stringy and long, your seedlings are stretching to try to find light. So that means that they're not getting enough sun, right? So maybe you need to get some grow lights, or maybe you need to put your seedlings on a southern facing window of your house, to try to get them as much sun as possible. Lack of nutrients in the soil is probably one of the most obvious issues. Overwatering is another issue. Like you can water your seedlings too much. You should be watering your seeds to the point that the soil is damp, not soaked. Okay, I mean you can soak them. If you got like, oh, I'm not gonna be back here to water these janks for a couple of days. But at the end of the day, like you should always make sure that you don't overwater, because you can actually drown the root systems, or drown the seeds, and then they start to rot, or they start to, they don't actually germinate because they got too much water. You actually drown the plants. Another issue is that plants get root bound if you leave them inside of the seed trays for too long, and then you try to transplant them, and you got to do a little bit extra in order to get them into the ground. So, once your seedling gets to a mature stage, mature being like it has its true leaves or a little bigger, then go ahead and get them bad boys out of that thing and put them in the ground. Because, what's the purpose of growing all the seedlings, and then they didn't got trapped inside of the seed tray, and you can't plant them because they didn't choke themselves out by the root system that's encircling themselves inside of the seed tray. Okay. Yeah, we would normally do a dialogue exercise about things you want to grow in the season, but we don't have that time, and I think I'm all out of time. Questions, thoughts, feedback? I'm open to the discussion. And I think I'm going to stop there because she said I had 5 minutes, and that was probably like 6 minutes ago.
Yes, thank you. Most of the questions were answered in the chat box by Michael Carter and Josie.
Go,
So
Michael.
really good.
And thank you, Josie.
Supporting you.
Ah!
I actually have a question for you.
Sure.
Given all of the information that you gave us today, is there a possibility that we can share this presentation with the group?
Oh, hell yeah. I'll send it to you on the email.
Okay, perfect.
No problem at all.
Yes, and everyone is saying thank you. Great presentation. We appreciate you for taking the time to teach us today about starting seeds.
No doubt.
Got my notes ready. I learned so much about GMOs and how it's going to affect my DNA. And I'm like, yeah.
I'm sorry for that tangent because, I mean, you know, we could spend a whole day talking about GMO crops versus hybrids. Like, let me just say this. Like, I love us, but yo, just because the grapes are seedless does not make them GMO. Okay, they were bred so that the seeds are very small. Bananas, yellow bananas, the seeds are there. You just can't see them. They're so small. They've been bred to be so small. But you go see a real banana tree, you know, in the wild, the seeds are fat, like big, huge seeds. But that's a variety. That's a wild crop relative. So, you know, yeah, like do your research, man. Read books. Don't just go on YouTube. Like there's a, you know what I'm saying? Study. Like know yourself approved through your study. This is super important. Like we are on the vanguard of food sovereignty for our communities, and we don't need to be out here dropping information that we heard on, you know what I'm saying, somebody's video, hidden colors. You know what I'm saying? We need to be like, pick up a book, bruh. Like go get the books and study and research. Like George Washington Carver didn't do all that work for you to just quote some stuff off YouTube. This man was a scientist. He did his research. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, that's my platform. I'm off my soapbox.
Drop some books, some titles in the chat box for us. Research.
Yeah, so I got some books around me. This is Gardening Indoors with Soil and Hydroponics. This is a really good book. I mean, I like books with lots of pictures and examples when we talk about gardening, and this one is one of those. Also, I got Gaia's Gardening.
Deron, they just asked, can you stop screen sharing so they can get a better view of the books?
Oh, shit. Okay, yeah. Let me see. Okay. Gaia's Garden. These are just what I got close to me. Gardening Indoors with Hydroponics. Rodale's Seed Starting book is a good one. The Market Gardener by Jean-Martin Fortier is great. The Urban Farmer by Curtis Stone is good. Man, I would get anything Rodale. You know what I mean? They got real good tomes and they've researched it. But also, I mean, if you ain't trying to cop these books, you know, I'll post a link on there for some of these PDFs that I got on my website. But, you know, you can go to the Cooperative Extension, man. Like Michael Carter tell you, they got research galore. Like that's all the Cooperative Extension has been doing for like the last, 70, 80 years is like doing research and putting it into PDFs for people to use. So anything that you need to know that you might find in a book somewhere, you can get it from your local Cooperative Extension. Just call them up, go on their website, and then start clicking, pulling stuff down. They got all types of information. Farming While Black, yep, is a great one by my sister Leah Penniman. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, those are just some good ones off the top of the head. Oh, I just got this book called The Aquaponic Farmer. It's you know, from rooter to the tutor, everything you want to know about aquaponics. There's another book, Hydroponic Gardening. You know, these are techniques that you should know. Nobody should. I don't advocate for any one technique because everybody's got their home. You know, it's like martial arts. Like the best style is the style that fits you. Like you might do an amalgamation of different styles, right? And so whatever fits your persona is what's going to work, you know, in this situation. I straw bale garden. I do raised beds. I do in ground. I've grown aquaponically. I grow hydroponically. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like what fits the scenario. You know what I'm saying? So it's not one size fits all. It's like, you know, everybody got to figure out what works for them.